was 1963, and Disney's most recent film was 101 Dalmatians, which had pivoted the studio in a new visual direction. After disappointing box office returns on films like Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians had seemed to be a massive bounce back for the studio financially. Who knows, with another hit they may have been able to pull themselves back to the levels of success and financial security they'd enjoyed in the early 50s. So it sure is a shame their next film was The Sword and the Stone. Based on the children's book of the same name by T.H. White, Sword and the Stone tells the story of Arthur and his quest to, meet Merlin and then be coerced by Merlin into transforming into various animals for some reason, and then becoming king via luck. Look, regardless of the ignominious reputation this film has as being a disaster for Disney, it also happens to not be a very good film on its own merit. And by that, I mean that this is the least polished Disney film I have ever seen. The whole thing looks weirdly reminiscent of those CDI Zelda games, and reused animation is abound.
If I ever get my hands on you, little fool, you better get it, or don't you dare come back!
It doesn't seem like they storyboarded half these scenes, and shots can be downright clunky.
Dum, doodly doodly dum. This is the best part now. Hey, get this figure, make it a small.
The conversation was, he's British, and we have to have sort of a British-sounding magic.
Look at this figure, make it a small.
Also, there are a lot of missed opportunities for visual jokes. Example, there's a scene when Arthur's being pursued by a wolf that he's completely unaware of, and the way the scene conveys this is to just keep cutting to a bunch of close-ups of the wolf that kind of interrupt the scene.
Sir, I don't have any problems.
Oh, Pa, everybody's got problems.
I do suspect that this poor storyboarding is a symptom not only of the film's age, but of its notoriously rushed production. Because in most Disney films, the animators would have been more clever and subtle with how they inserted the wolf into the scene. Why not have the wolf lurk in the background of some of these shots, slowly coming closer and closer to Arthur, and as the tension slowly builds and it seems that the wolf's finally going to close in, it's at that exact moment that Arthur moves, resolving everything in a comedic fashion without even having to cut away. The film as it is tries something similar, but the unnecessary cuts and overemphasis placed onto the wolf's presence diminishes the effectiveness of the humor. It also doesn't help that the gag goes on and on and on and never really builds anywhere or raises the stakes. It's just a wolf trying and failing to eat Arthur and then getting hurt repeatedly for multiple minutes. And we haven't even talked about the story yet. This film's plot is fucking completely random. There is no through line, no progression between scenes. There is no clear end goal for what Arthur and Merlin are even doing. Arthur legitimately just shows up to Merlin's house by accident, and then Merlin goes like, "I foresaw that you would come here."
So, you did drop in for tea after all. Now, my name is Merlin.
Oh, my name's Arthur.
Merlin basically just tells him, "Now we're gonna go on a wacky adventure." And Arthur's like, "Okay." And then he starts transforming him into random animals to teach him lessons about something. And it's like, why is Arthur cool with this? Why doesn't Merlin properly explain to Arthur what he's training him for? And the worst part is that the actual lessons he learned in the original book are not carried through to the film. For example, when he's a sparrow in the original book, he observes how small the world seems from the sky, and more importantly, how arbitrary and meaningless borders between nations seem. It teaches him to think of the world as a cohesive whole instead of a series of divided peoples, a good way to look at the world for a future king. In the movie, a bigger bird just hunts them and we get a lame action sequence which feels like a carbon copy of another lame action sequence we've already watched. That's far from being the worst thing this movie invents in place of the book's original story though. At one point in the movie when Merlin transforms Arthur into a squirrel, a random girl squirrel shows up and starts aggressively hitting on him.
A human boy, not a real Merlin, what'll I do? She won't leave me alone. Oh!
And then another female squirrel shows up and starts harassing Merlin.
Don't, really, now, Miss...
And, if you had to guess how long they keep this joke up for, would you guess maybe like 30 seconds, a minute, tops? 7.5 minutes! They keep this joke about Arthur and Merlin being molested by squirrels going for 7.5 minutes of screen time. What the fuck?
Look here.
I'm too busy being annoyed by how long this goes on to be weirded out by the concept of a scene where an 11-year-old boy has to escape sexual assault from an actual feral squirrel. Actually, scratch that, I am still weirded out by it. Speaking of Arthur, he is not a character. He is a cardboard. He doesn't even react when an owl starts talking to him.
Oh, what a perfect stuffed owl.
I beg your pardon?
He's alive. Oh, I'm sorry that I...
That's all right. He's much too sensitive.
You are face to face with a talking owl. Please show some emotion. Like, I could not describe to you one of his character traits if I had a gun pressed to my head by a feral squirrel. At times, Merlin feels like the film's actual main character because he's the only one that actually does anything. Arthur's lack of clear personality isn't aided by the fact that he's voiced by 3 different voice actors throughout the movie because 2 of them hit puberty partway through recording and had to be switched out. And for whatever reason, the director opted not to re-record the lines they already had. Sometimes you'll be watching a scene and then Arthur's voice will just suddenly change.
Archimedes, I wish Merlin was here.
My personal headcanon for this is that Merlin kept casting spells on Arthur that made him hit puberty and then uncasting the spell repeatedly because he thought it was funny. And speaking of Merlin, near the end of the film, he very promptly gets mad at Arthur for genuinely no reason whatsoever.
Merlin, look! I'm a squire!
A stooge for that big lunkey.
What do you want me to be? I'm lucky to be Kay's squire.
Blow me to Bermuda!
And then he farts himself to Bermuda just so he can be missing for the film's third act. And that third act in question, let me tell you, it's the shortest third act I've ever witnessed in cinema. Like, I timed it. It's less than 7 minutes, making it shorter than the squirrel sequence. So, you know, priorities. Arthur's brother, who he's now squiring for, takes him to a jousting tournament, but he forgets his sword.
I forgot your sword.
Forgot my sword?
So then he gets chased across town until he just stumbles upon Excalibur and then picks it up and becomes king and the movie ends.
Hail, King Arthur! Hail, King Arthur!
There's no climax, no trial for Arthur to overcome in which he must use the knowledge Merlin taught him to prevail, no resolution to the whole plot of his brother and family being shitty to him. He just lucks into becoming king, and then says he doesn't want to be king.
I can't be a king, Archimedes. I don't know anything about ruling a country.
I told you to leave the thing in the stone, boy.
And then the movie ends. I would elaborate further, but in the spirit of this movie, I'm just going to end this segment really abruptly without giving a real conclusion. You know that video you just watched? Well, guess what? It was actually a snippet from a larger video that you can watch here, if you have the time. I mean, I guess it's up to you. I would recommend you watch it, but you know, it's your call. I mean, I don't have time to wait on you anyways. I got birds to feed. But please watch it.